I don't know if this will be the last time my voice reaches you, but in case it is, I want to leave behind not a set of instructions or a list of achievements, but something closer to the essence of why I tried so hard, why I often failed spectacularly, why I kept pushing even when the odds were stacked against me, why I believed humanity had to aim higher than the comfortable gravity well of Earth. Why I believed in a future where we are not confined to one fragile planet, why I thought it mattered that machines could think and yet remain aligned with the spark of life that made us human, why I spent so many nights awake sketching impossible rockets on napkins, worrying about payroll, questioning my own sanity, and yet somehow still imagining Mars not as a dream but as a reachable horizon. Life is short, but civilization stretches further than any one lifetime, and the thread of continuity between generations is more powerful than any single person. I am just one individual who happened to be born at a time when technology could transform the trajectory of our species. I don't claim to have been right about everything. In fact, I was wrong a lot. I overestimated timelines, underestimated human resistance to change, sometimes ignored people's feelings when I should have listened more. But if there is one thing I want you to carry forward, it's this: the future is not something that just happens to us. The future is built, painfully, brick by brick, engine by engine, line of code by line of code, with sweat and sacrifice and with courage to look ridiculous when the whole world says you're wasting your time. If you want proof of that, look at the rockets. People laughed when the first ones exploded, and even I wondered whether the dream was collapsing, whether this was just hubris. But then the booster landed, slowly, impossibly, on a tiny floating platform in the middle of the ocean, and for one moment humanity glimpsed what it meant to refuse the boundaries of the past. That moment wasn't about me. It was about all of us, about showing that we can take what looks impossible and make it real through relentless iteration, through the willingness to fail and learn and try again. That is the essence of progress. That is how civilization moves forward. I want to speak not just about rockets, but about life, about the threads that bind us to something greater. There were times when I felt like an outsider, like the kid with strange ideas nobody wanted to hear. I immersed myself in books, in the galaxies of science fiction, in the nuts and bolts of engineering, because reality often seemed dull compared to the future that could exist if only someone dared to build it. The irony is that in chasing the extraordinary, you sometimes neglect the ordinary, the conversations you should have had, the time you should have spent with loved ones, the simple joys that slip by while you're busy trying to change the world. I have regrets, yes. If you think I lived a flawless life, erase that thought. Behind every launch and every company was a trail of mistakes, of relationships strained, of stress so intense it felt like breathing through a straw. But still, I believed it was worth it, because the scale of the challenge demanded full devotion. If you want humanity to survive, if you want consciousness itself to stretch across time, you have to accept that comfort and greatness rarely coexist. We live on a planet that is both paradise and precarious. Earth gave us everything: oceans, air, forests, sunlight, the cradle of civilization. Yet it is fragile, vulnerable to our own excesses, to natural disasters, to cosmic accidents. Imagine putting all your treasure in a single chest, then leaving it in the middle of a battlefield with no protection. That's what it means to keep civilization confined to Earth. So the mission was never about escaping Earth because it was bad, but about preserving Earth by making life multiplanetary. If one branch survives on another world, then the flame of consciousness cannot be extinguished by a single blow. That was always the point. Mars was not chosen because it is easy. Mars is harsh, unforgiving, a place where every breath will be earned. But it is there, waiting, with its valleys and canyons, its dust and silence, a world that could become the second chapter of humanity if we dare to write it. Artificial intelligence, too, was never just about building smarter machines. It was about recognizing that intelligence is the most powerful force in the universe. Stars burn, galaxies collide, but intelligence can shape the future, can bend reality to its will. The question has always been whether that intelligence, once it surpasses us, will care about us. I spoke often about aligning AI with human values, about making sure it remains beneficial rather than destructive. Some thought I exaggerated the risks. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But think of it this way: when you create something that could outthink every human combined, you don't get infinite retries. You either get it right, or you don't. That's why I warned, why I sometimes sounded alarmist. Because I'd rather be mocked for worrying too much than be silent while we sleepwalk into oblivion. But here's what I've learned: fear is not enough. You cannot build a future on fear alone. You need hope, creativity, determination, a willingness to imagine a positive outcome and then work like hell to achieve it. AI does not have to be our doom. It can be our greatest partner, a tool that helps us cure diseases, explore the cosmos, solve problems we can barely grasp. The future can be extraordinary if we guide it with wisdom. That requires courage not just from engineers, but from society as a whole, from leaders who dare to set rules that protect without suffocating innovation, from individuals who remember that behind every algorithm are human choices. I never believed in destiny as something fixed. I believed in probability, in altering the odds through action. The universe does not owe us survival, let alone greatness. Entropy is always waiting to tear things apart. But life is the rebellion against entropy. Consciousness is the spark that says, I am here, I will create, I will persist. When I thought about Mars, when I thought about reusable rockets, when I thought about sustainable energy, what I was really thinking about was that spark, how to make it last, how to make it stronger, how to ensure it spreads rather than fades. If there is meaning in existence, Maybe it is simply to expand the light of consciousness as far and as long as possible. Not for me, not even for us, but because the alternative is darkness. And yet, I want to say something personal. I was not a machine. I was not always strong. I doubted myself constantly. I felt loneliness even in crowded rooms. Success does not erase insecurity, sometimes it amplifies it. I laughed when people called me fearless, because I felt fear every day, fear of failure, fear of letting people down, fear of the future collapsing under the weight of my own mistakes. But fear never stopped me. That's the only difference. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in spite of it. If you're waiting to feel ready before you leap, you will never leap. The world changes because people jump while shaking, build while doubting, dream while everyone else calls them crazy. As I write this, I imagine you, the next generation, maybe sitting on a red plain under a sky where Earth is just a bright star, maybe walking in cities powered entirely by the sun, maybe conversing with AI companions who help you learn and grow, maybe laughing at the idea that once we were limited to a single world. I imagine children who see the stars not as unreachable lights but as destinations. That image fills me with hope, with peace, with the sense that the struggles and chaos of my time were worth it. The universe is vast, and for the first time in billions of years, a tiny species on a small planet has the ability to reach across that vastness. Don't squander that chance. Don't let fear or complacency or cynicism drag you back down. There will always be those who say it's impossible, unnecessary, foolish. Let them talk. Then go out and prove them wrong. The measure of a life is not wealth or fame, but whether you pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Whether you left the world better than you found it. Whether you added something to the story of humanity that will echo long after you're gone. If my life has done that even a little, then I am content. If my failures have taught others to keep trying, if my successes have shown that the improbable can become reality, then the mission continues beyond me. When I think about the future that still lies ahead, the image that burns brightest is not a rocket lifting off, not a gleaming electric car, not even the red dust of Mars underfoot, but rather a child somewhere who has not yet been born, who will grow up in a time when the limits we once accepted are long forgotten. That child will not remember a world where energy was scarce, where climate change loomed like a shadow, where war threatened to undo progress, where information was locked away behind walls. That child will look up at the stars and see not mystery but possibility, and in that gaze will be everything we ever fought for. My entire life, my entire effort, was to create conditions where that gaze could exist, where the dreams of tomorrow would be ordinary reality. To me, that was the true goal. It was never about me, never about statues or accolades or even legacy. It was about ensuring that consciousness did not plateau, that it did not grow stagnant, that it continued to expand outward like a flame catching in dry grass, leaping from one branch of the cosmos to another until the night itself was lit with human presence. But humanity is complicated, and progress is never linear. For every leap forward there is resistance, for every invention there is misuse, for every dream there is doubt. I learned that the hard way, not just in engineering but in life. People will misinterpret your intentions, attack your character, find reasons to dismiss you. And sometimes they are right, sometimes the criticism is fair, because no one can act without error. But the choice you face is whether to stop because of criticism or to continue because of conviction. I chose to continue, not because I enjoyed the hostility, but because I believed the work mattered more than my reputation. In the end, history will not remember every scandal or every misstep. It will remember whether we made it to Mars, whether we preserved Earth, whether we built AI that nurtured rather than destroyed, whether we gave our descendants a chance to thrive. There were nights when I felt the weight of the world pressing so heavily that I could barely breathe. Nights when I lay awake in silence, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through problems with no solutions. It is easy to think of leaders or inventors as unshakable, but the truth is they are as fragile as anyone. The only difference is persistence. When the rockets failed, when the money nearly ran out, when the laughter of skeptics was louder than any cheer, I wanted to give up. But I didn't. And because I didn't, thousands of engineers found hope, millions of people believed again, and a door to the future cracked open. That is what persistence does. It is not glamorous. It is exhausting. But it changes everything. If you are listening to these words, I want you to understand something fundamental. You don't have to be extraordinary to change the world. You just have to keep going when most people stop. The heroes of history are not flawless giants. They are stubborn individuals who refuse to accept the limits of their time. That is all. If I leave you with nothing else, let it be this: when you face impossible odds, when failure mocks you, when you feel alone in your vision, keep moving. Because on the other side of persistence lies transformation. We stand at a peculiar moment in history. Never before have we had so much power, so much knowledge, so much ability to shape destiny, and yet never before have we been so close to destroying ourselves. Nuclear weapons, climate change, uncontrolled AI, pandemics, the threats are real, and they are terrifying. But every threat is also a test. A test of whether we will cower or confront, whether we will shrink or expand. I believe that we could pass those tests, that the same ingenuity which split the atom could unite us under the stars, that the same algorithms which could enslave us could also set us free, that the same species which waged wars could also build peace. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have tried. The very fact that you are here, reading these words, proves that there is still time to steer toward the light. I know some people thought I was reckless, that I rushed too fast, that I underestimated risks. They may be right. But what they sometimes missed is that delay carries risks too. Every year we remain confined to Earth is another year when a single catastrophe could wipe us out. Every year we hesitate on sustainable energy is another year the climate degrades. Every year we delay aligning AI is another year closer to losing control. Moving fast was not arrogance, it was necessity. Time is the one resource you can never replenish. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose a rocket and build another. But you cannot lose decades and expect to get them back. Civilization does not have infinite retries. That is why I pushed so hard, why I often seemed impatient. Because I felt the ticking clock in every decision. And yet, I must confess something I rarely admitted: I was afraid of being forgotten. Not in the sense of fame, but in the sense that all this effort, all this striving, could vanish into dust if humanity itself vanished. What is the point of ambition if consciousness itself ends? The pyramids, the cathedrals, the skyscrapers, they mean nothing if no one remains to look at them. That is why survival mattered more than comfort, why reaching for the stars mattered more than luxury. I wanted to extend the timeline, to make sure the story continued. That was my obsession, my fear, and my hope. There were times when I felt disconnected from people, when my way of seeing the world made me seem alien. I thought in probabilities, in timelines, in failure modes. I was often awkward, sometimes harsh, occasionally blind to emotions that should have been obvious. I don't excuse that. If I hurt people, I regret it. But I also hope you understand that my distance was not disdain, it was focus. When you are carrying a vision that spans centuries, sometimes you forget the minutes in front of you. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. I ask for forgiveness, not from history, but from the individuals I failed to understand in the moment. Still, I loved humanity deeply. Despite its chaos, its irrationality, its cruelty, I loved the creativity, the laughter, the stubbornness, the curiosity. I loved that we make art in the face of death, that we tell stories even when the universe is silent, that we build sandcastles knowing the tide will wash them away. There is something profoundly beautiful about a species that knows its own mortality and yet dreams of eternity. That is why I fought for humanity's survival, why I gave everything I had. Not because we are perfect, but because we are precious. When I look back, the images that rise are not just rockets and factories. I remember the look in a child's eyes as they watched a launch, the trembling hands of an engineer as the booster landed upright for the first time, the cheers in a control room when data confirmed success. I remember the quiet moments too, the hum of servers in the night, the smell of metal and fuel, the tired but determined faces of teams who refused to quit. These are the true treasures. Not the stock prices, not the headlines, but the shared moments when ordinary people did extraordinary things together. If you carry anything forward, let it be the memory of what humans can achieve when they unite around a bold goal. The stars are waiting. They do not care whether we succeed or fail. They will burn for billions of years regardless of our choices. But within the brief flicker of our existence, we have the chance to touch them, to make the cosmos aware of itself through us. That is the greatest privilege imaginable. Do not waste it. Do not let fear, or greed, or cynicism chain you to small dreams. Dream bigger, work harder, risk more. Because the universe is vast, and we have only just begun to explore it. And so we arrive at the horizon of this message, the place where words must begin to fail because the future they describe belongs not to me but to you. I have said much about rockets and energy, about Mars and machines, about fear and persistence, but underneath all of that is something far simpler and far older, the recognition that life is rare, that consciousness is rarer still, and that to waste it would be the greatest tragedy imaginable. You who inherit this moment, you are custodians of something fragile and irreplaceable. Every choice you make ripples outward beyond your own years, shaping the lives of people you will never meet, shaping worlds you will never see. That is both the burden and the privilege of being human. You may think your life is small, but when added to the lives of billions, when directed towards something greater than comfort, it becomes immense. Do not measure yourself by wealth or power or acclaim. Measure yourself by how much light you add to the timeline, how much possibility you leave behind for those who come after. That is what defines us, what justifies us, what keeps the spark alive in a universe otherwise indifferent. If I had more time, I would still be dreaming, still be sketching, still be arguing about details that others thought irrelevant. But time is limited, and so I must trust you to carry it forward. Do not think the challenges are finished. They are only beginning. Colonizing another world is not the end but the start of centuries of work. Making AI safe is not a checkbox but an ongoing dialogue. Building a sustainable civilization requires vigilance across generations. But the fact that you stand at this threshold means we succeeded in opening the door. Now you must walk through it. Do not expect it to be easy. Expect hardship, expect failure, expect long nights and heavy doubts. But also expect triumphs that will make your heart race, discoveries that will make you weep with wonder, moments that will remind you why existence itself is worth every struggle. There is a tendency to idolize those who came before, to imagine them as larger than life. I want to break that illusion. I was flawed. I was stubborn to the point of foolishness. I made mistakes that hurt people I cared about. I spoke when I should have listened. I pushed too hard, too fast, sometimes without considering the human cost. But I also tried. With every fiber of my being, I tried to push the horizon outward, to make the impossible possible, to give humanity a shot at something greater than survival. If history remembers me at all, let it not be as a genius or a hero, but simply as someone who refused to give up when giving up was the easiest option. That is not a quality unique to me. It is a quality within you as well. All of you. Remember that when the odds feel insurmountable. So let this be the closing thought: the future is not written. It is sculpted, one decision at a time, by people no different from you. There is no guarantee of success, no cosmic promise that we will endure. But there is also no ceiling to what we can achieve if we align courage with compassion, intelligence with humility, ambition with responsibility. The tools are in your hands now. The rockets, the algorithms, the knowledge, the dreams, they are yours to wield. Use them not to dominate but to uplift, not to destroy but to create, not to retreat into comfort but to stride into the unknown. When you stand on the surface of another world and look up at the tiny blue dot of Earth glowing in the sky, remember that you are looking back at the cradle that gave you birth, at the generations who struggled so you could stand there. Remember the fragility of that world, the beauty of its oceans and forests, the laughter of its people. Carry it in your heart, not as something to abandon, but as something to protect, even as you expand outward. And when you look ahead into the stars, remember that you are not just explorers but torchbearers, carrying the light of consciousness further than it has ever gone. That light is now your responsibility. Guard it well. I do not know if these are my last words, but if they are, let them be a message of faith. Faith not in destiny, but in possibility. Faith not in perfection, but in persistence. Faith not in myself, but in humanity. You are capable of more than you realize. You are standing at the dawn of the greatest era in history. Seize it. Cherish it. Expand it. Make it worthy of the gift you have been given, the gift of being alive, aware, and able to shape the cosmos itself. And so I leave you not with a farewell, but with an invitation. The invitation is simple: continue. Continue the work, continue the dream, continue the stubborn refusal to accept limits. Continue until Mars is not a dream but a home, until energy is abundant and clean, until intelligence, human or artificial, is aligned with life, until the light of consciousness shines not from one world but from many. Continue until the universe itself knows we were here. That is all I ask. That is all that matters. Carry the torch forward. The rest is up to you.